Chosen one, before we talk about the person God is bringing into your life, I want to ask you something. Have you noticed that lately your heart has been responding differently? Even if your circumstances still look the same, maybe you woke up one morning and realized you no longer felt the urge to reopen an old conversation. Maybe the room was just as quiet as it had always been. Yet for the first time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like something was gently settling inside you, as if your spirit had recognized a change before your eyes ever could. That is one reason this message has found you today. Something has been moving beneath the surface for longer than you realize. You sensed it after prayer, during ordinary mornings, and in those moments when familiar doors quietly lost their power over you. Nothing dramatic has happened where everyone can see it. Yet deep within you there has been a quiet certainty that one season is ending, while another is already beginning. Listen carefully, because this part matters. This is not a message asking you to chase someone, search for hidden signs in every stranger, or keep checking your phone hoping a promise will finally appear on your screen. God has never needed your anxiety to complete what He has already begun. The person He sends will never require you to trade away the peace He has been teaching you to protect. You will never have to become smaller just to be loved by what God has prepared. You will never need to perform, beg for consistency, or silence your discernment to keep the right person close. What comes from God may stretch your heart in beautiful ways, but it will never ask you to betray the wisdom He has been growing inside you. That difference is more important than you know, and perhaps this is why everything feels closer than you expected. Not because anyone can give you a date, and not because loneliness has the authority to rush heaven's timing. It feels close because the journey has already started. The first evidence was never meant to be a face, a message, or someone suddenly appearing at your door. The first evidence has always been the person you are quietly becoming. Something has changed in you, and you may have overlooked it because it happened so gently. You no longer find yourself fascinated by almost mixed signals, no longer feel romantic. Emotional chaos no longer convinces you that a connection must be meaningful simply because it feels intense. There is a quiet place inside you that has begun saying, "I have lived that story before, and I do not belong there anymore." That is what preparation feels like. It is rarely loud. It often arrives as a peaceful refusal to return to what once felt impossible to leave. Before God opens the next door, He creates room within you to receive it, without losing yourself in the process. For a long time, you may have believed the waiting meant you had somehow been forgotten. You watched other people fall in love, find support, build families, and step into prayers that looked so similar to your own. You celebrated with them sincerely, yet there were quiet nights when you sat alone with a question you barely wanted to admit. "Father, what about me?" Maybe you never spoke those words out loud. Maybe you covered them with faith because you wanted to believe you were stronger than your disappointment. Yet, hidden beneath your prayers was a small part of your heart that wondered whether your season had somehow passed you by. The Father never lost sight of you. What felt like delay was often protection over a meeting that needed both lives to arrive at the right moment. Sometimes the wrong person arrives too early and leaves wounds that take years to heal. Sometimes even the right person can arrive before your heart has learned to stop abandoning itself just to keep someone close. Stay with me, because before this message is over, you'll understand why certain doors never opened, no matter how hard you pushed against them. You'll understand why some desires remained alive even after hope felt exhausted. And you'll begin to recognize the difference between someone God truly sends and the familiar echo that often appears just before something genuine arrives. Every strong emotion is not a divine assignment. Every familiar feeling is not confirmation from heaven. Some people awaken the parts of you that are still hurting, while others awaken the person God has been restoring all along. In this season, that distinction is becoming clearer than ever. If this speaks to your spirit, type "ready," not because your comment creates the promise, but because sometimes speaking agreement out loud helps your heart stop hiding from what God has already been preparing. Type "ready" if you can feel that you're standing at the edge of something new. The person God is sending is moving toward the meeting point, but so are you. Every quiet change within you has been leading toward the version of yourself who can recognize peace without mistaking it for emptiness, who can receive love without losing wisdom, and who can remain anchored when the promise finally has a face. Perhaps the hardest part has been trying to explain what you've been feeling. Nothing obvious has happened. No message arrived. No unexpected introduction appeared. No one wandered into your life saying, "I am the one God sent." Yet somehow you know that something has shifted. You notice it in the early hours before the world becomes noisy. You notice it when familiar names no longer stir the same emotions they once did. The part of your heart that used to reach for whatever felt familiar has become quieter. And that quiet is not emptiness, it is sacred preparation. Maybe you've also noticed that some conversations no longer satisfy you the way they once did. Certain relationships suddenly feel louder than your spirit can comfortably hold, while people who once had easy access to your emotions no longer seem able to reach the deepest places within you. You haven't become colder. You have simply become more discerning about what is allowed to live close to your heart. There was a season when a single message could completely change your day. One compliment could make you overlook every warning your spirit had already noticed. A little attention from the wrong person was enough to convince you that you had found your future, but something beautiful has been changing, quietly and almost unnoticed. Even when loneliness still visits, it no longer leads you the way it once did. Even on difficult days, confusion has less power over your decisions. You aren't chasing in the same way. You aren't pleading to be understood by people who already decided not to see you. Instead, another voice has been growing stronger within you. It simply says, "I can't go back there." Those words may sound small, but they carry the weight of healing. They mean an old room has finally closed behind you. They mean your heart has learned something sacred from every door that never opened. They mean the Father has been teaching you that every ending carried wisdom, even when all you could feel was loss. You may still have days when your confidence rises and falls. Questions still come. You still wonder how, when, and through whom this next season will unfold. Yet beneath every unanswered question is a quiet certainty that your life is being rearranged for an arrival far greater than you first imagined. Listen closely. The person God sends may become the love you've prayed for, but they may also appear as a faithful friend, a wise mentor, a helper, a trusted companion, or someone carrying the very key that unlocks the next chapter of your journey. Don't make the promise smaller than God intended, simply because your imagination settled on only one picture. However they arrive, one truth will remain the same. They will draw your heart closer to God, never farther away. They will never feed your deepest wounds while calling that destiny. They will never depend on your confusion to feel important. What God sends brings clarity, even when it asks you to grow. Maybe that explains why you've slowly lost your appetite for almost consistent, almost honest, almost malleable, almost committed. There was a time when you accepted pieces because you feared asking for the whole would leave you with nothing. But your heart has been changing, and that change is one of the clearest signs that preparation has already begun. Chosen one, something beautiful has been changing inside you, even if you've struggled to find words for it. You have reached a place where peace matters more than performance, where honesty feels more valuable than the kind of chemistry that constantly leaves your heart bruised. Waiting with God has started to feel lighter than forcing doors that never truly welcomed you, and that quiet change is one of the clearest signs that this season is different. This is what I would call the receiver season. It is the season where the Father gently restores the part of you that receives, recognizes, and responds to what He is doing. He isn't only preparing the blessing itself, He is shaping the heart that will one day recognize it without confusing it for something else. Because a wounded heart often mistakes peace for emptiness, exhaustion for wisdom, or anxiety for love. A weary receiver can push away the very thing they once prayed for, simply because it feels unfamiliar. A fearful receiver can keep testing a healthy connection until the weight of old wounds becomes heavier than the relationship itself. A lonely receiver can place impossible expectations on someone who was never meant to carry the place that belongs to God alone. That is why the Father has been slowing your steps instead of speeding them up. He has been teaching you that fear should never decide your direction, and urgency should never become your compass. Some delays have been holy because they gave your heart enough time to stop reacting from survival and start responding from peace. You have probably felt this long before you understood it. There are people who leave your chest tight, your thoughts scattered, and your spirit strangely unsettled after every conversation. Then there are moments, places, or even certain people that leave you breathing a little deeper without trying to impress you at all. Your spirit becomes quieter, your mind less crowded, and you leave without feeling the need to force anything. Pay attention to those moments. Discernment is often gentle before it becomes obvious. Sometimes God lets peace arrive first, and the visible confirmation comes later. That quiet sense that something is being arranged without your control is not wishful thinking. It is often how heaven prepares your heart before your eyes can recognize what has already begun. This is part of the holy crossing. Long before two people recognize each other, God may already be preparing both journeys. He may be closing a chapter in one life while healing hidden fears in another. He may be redirecting conversations, changing priorities, removing distractions, and quietly bringing two stories toward the same meeting place before either person understands what is happening. That is why this season cannot be measured only by what you can see. Sometimes the strongest evidence is found in what no longer fits your life. Notice what you have quietly outgrown. Notice the surprising peace that came after releasing something you once believed you could never live without. Some of you stopped longing for the very person you once begged God to restore. That wasn't your heart growing cold. It was your heart growing free. Some of you no longer feel compelled to check who viewed your story, replied to your message, remembered your birthday, or regretted letting you go. That isn't indifference, that is attachment, quietly releasing its grip. Others have found themselves praying differently. Instead of handing God the name you wanted him to choose, you simply opened your hands and trusted his wisdom. That is surrender. That is maturity. That is the posture of someone who can receive a person sent by God without expecting them to become what only the Father can be. The one God sends may bring comfort, partnership, encouragement, or confirmation. They may walk beside you through an important season of your life, but they were never meant to become the foundation of your identity. The place in your heart that belongs to God has always been too sacred for another person to occupy. This is where so many people miss what they have been praying for. They aren't truly searching for someone God has prepared. They are searching for someone to finally erase every old rejection, quiet every insecurity, and convince them they have always been worthy of love. Yet the person God sends cannot complete an identity that God himself has been patiently restoring. They will meet the version of you that has been formed through this season, not the version that disappears to keep someone interested, not the version that sacrifices peace just to avoid being alone. They will meet the person who has learned that being chosen by God is a deeper foundation than being chosen by anyone else. So pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. What has quietly changed in me these past months? What no longer controls my emotions the way it once did? What treatment can I no longer excuse? What peace have I started protecting, even when protecting it meant letting certain people walk away? Those answers matter more than you realize. They are evidence. They are the hidden signs that tell you your life is moving forward. Even when your eyes cannot yet see the destination, you are becoming someone who no longer confuses human approval with divine identity, and that transformation is preparing you for what comes next. If the person God is sending is already moving toward the meeting point, another question naturally follows. Why haven't you seen them yet? Why does your spirit sense movement while your eyes still see ordinary days? The answer has never been that God forgot you. The answer reaches much deeper than that, and once your heart truly understands it, waiting will begin to lose its power to feel like punishment. Chosen one, you've heard people say that delay is not denial, but your heart has needed more than a familiar phrase. It has needed comfort for the nights when you smiled in front of everyone else, then quietly asked God why life seemed to keep moving for others while your own prayers remained unanswered. You celebrated weddings, new beginnings, restored families, and answered prayers with genuine joy. Yet after everyone went home, there were evenings when one quiet question remained sitting beside you. Father, when will it be my turn? Maybe you never spoke those words aloud because you believed mature faith wasn't supposed to sound like that. But faith has never required you to pretend your heart doesn't grow tired. There were moments when the silence felt painfully personal. You wondered why someone prepared by God hadn't entered your life, if he truly understood how long you had carried so much on your own. Yet there was something your wounded heart couldn't fully see. Waiting is not always punishment. Silence is not always abandonment. Delay is often the quiet protection of something too valuable to arrive before the right season. Sometimes the wrong person arrives while your wounds are still making decisions, and what could have been healing becomes another source of confusion. Sometimes even the right person can arrive before your heart has learned that love never requires you to abandon yourself. God wasn't withholding the promise. He was protecting the meeting place where both your healing and his timing could finally meet. Think back to who you were before this season began shaping you. You loved deeply, but many times you forgot to extend that same love toward yourself. You prayed faithfully for the right person while quietly believing you had to become whatever someone else needed just to keep them from leaving. You called it patience. You called it loyalty. Sometimes you even called it unconditional love. But hidden beneath those beautiful words was another story your heart was still carrying. Part of you believed that asking for honesty, consistency, or honor might cost you the relationship, so you learned to survive by accepting less than your soul truly needed. That wasn't because you lacked love, it was because fear had quietly wrapped itself in spiritual language. And now, through this season, the Father has been gently teaching you the difference. Chosen one, God has never been preparing only a person for you. He has been preparing a meeting one that can only happen when two lives are ready to recognize what he has been doing. The Holy Crossing is not just paths meeting, but two hearts arriving with enough healing, humility, and truth to see what earlier seasons would have missed. That is the hidden part of this story. It may have felt like God was withholding someone, but he was protecting the place where your lives would meet. He was guarding you from entering a sacred connection while still believing love had to be earned through self-abandonment. That is why certain doors closed and certain relationships could not last. They were never strong enough for what God was preparing. Those endings were never proof of rejection. They were simply too small to carry what heaven intended. What once looked like delay begins to make sense when you hear it as God saying, "Not here, not while fear is still leading, not while you confuse being needed with being loved." That understanding changes everything. Instead of asking, "When will they come?" your heart begins asking, "Who am I becoming while I wait?" That question lifts you out of panic and into awareness of the quiet transformation already happening within you. Waiting no longer feels empty when you see what it has been forming. It has been shaping the posture that will protect the promise when it arrives. You are not forgotten, not behind, not late. Every quiet season has been bringing you into alignment for what God has prepared. Before the true arrival, something familiar may still return. An old pattern, an old voice, a familiar pull may test whether you still move from who you used to be or who you are becoming. Now imagine a morning that feels close even if you cannot see it yet. You wake in quiet light, and something in you is different before anything outside changes. You no longer reach for proof of being chosen. You already carry a quiet confidence that rests beneath your breath. You are no longer searching for validation in messages or silence. A deeper peace has taken root, not as performance, but as identity, anchored in the Father. Long before anyone recognized you, you were already chosen by God. That truth begins to reshape how you live. You move differently, decide differently, and no longer feel the need to prove your worth or explain your boundaries. Quiet confidence replaces the pressure to convince anyone of your value. And when the person God has prepared finally draws near, you notice something unexpected. Their presence doesn't create confusion. There is steadiness, not emotional chaos. Even if your heart needs time to adjust to it, something inside you begins to soften. The nervous system no longer braces for disappointment. Not because they are perfect, but because there is order in how they show up and peace in how they treat your heart. They do not ask you to shrink, perform, or abandon your connection with God. They do not compete with your calling. They recognize it. And they never require you to become less of yourself in order to be loved. Peace becomes the clearest sign. Not instant answers, but growing clarity. Even when the connection stretches you, it will not pull you back into what God already freed you from. Picture that future morning again. You move through the day without rehearsing rejection. You receive connection without trying to control every outcome. You let things unfold without fear leading the story. This is the version of you God has been forming, steady, discerning, no longer chasing reassurance or testing every good thing until it disappears. Someone who can receive without making the gift into a God. The one sent by God will never become your source. They may carry love, wisdom, or provision, but everything they bring ultimately points you back to the one who sent them. That is why your future is safer than your fear suggests. You are not waiting to become valuable. You are not waiting to become chosen. You already are. The person God sends will only recognize what the Father has been restoring all along. That is why this season matters. Every closed door has sharpened your discernment. Every quiet stretch has strengthened your discernment. Every quiet stretch has strengthened your foundation, and every delay has protected something sacred so you would never trade your future for something that could not carry it. Chosen one. When that person finally steps into your life, you won't meet them as someone still starving for reassurance. You'll meet them as someone whose soul has learned where real nourishment comes from. There's a quiet strength that forms when you've spent enough time at the Father's table, and once your heart has tasted that peace, it stops begging people to fill what only God can hold. That changes everything inside you. A starving heart reaches for anything that feels like relief, but a healed heart waits long enough to recognize what actually carries life. Hunger rushes and clings, while healing listens and discerns. Hunger confuses intensity for intimacy, but healing watches the fruit before it gives its trust. That's why this next part matters so deeply. Before the one sent by God is clearly recognized, something familiar often tries to speak first. It doesn't always look dangerous. In fact, it often feels comfortingly familiar, speaking directly to what your wounded heart once longed to hear. And because you've waited so long, it can feel like the answer you've been praying for. Slow down. Familiarity is not confirmation, and timing alone is not proof of divine sending. Sometimes what shows up right after prayer isn't your answer, but a test of whether your heart can now recognize what once held it captive. This is the counterfeit echo. Sometimes it comes through a person, sometimes through an old feeling or fantasy. It imitates destiny just enough to awaken hope, but quietly drains your peace while it does. It feels powerful, but it never feels settled, always leaving you guessing where you stand. You know this pattern. Someone comes close, speaks deeply, then becomes inconsistent when stability is needed. They make you feel seen for a moment, but avoid the honesty, responsibility, and consistency that true connection requires. What once felt like chemistry was often just your longing speaking louder than your discernment. But something has shifted in you, not because you became cold, not because you stopped believing in love, but because you've learned to hear differently now. The Father has been teaching your spirit what peace actually sounds like, and because of that, the person He sends will not rely on confusion to keep you close. They won't keep you guessing, they won't hide behind spiritual language, and they won't punish your discernment for noticing truth that matters more than it seems. Counterfeit connections speak directly to desire while feeding old wounds. The emotions rise fast, but fruit tells the truth over time. So look beyond intensity. Does this connection bring you closer to God or deeper into obsession? Does it create clarity or inner restlessness? Does it invite honesty or fear of speaking your needs? The answer begins with fruit, not feeling. The counterfeit echo makes you chase. The sent one brings enough peace for you to recognize, not pursue. The counterfeit asks you to silence your discernment. The true connection never requires you to betray your inner voice just to keep it. This isn't about suspicion. It's about protection of what God has healed in you. Some people are not evil. They are simply not assigned. Some may care, but still lack the maturity or alignment for what God is leading you into. And accepting that can save you from repeating what broke you. You are no longer called to confuse access with assignment. Not every open door is meant for you, and your spirit often knows before your emotions catch up. Honoring that quiet knowing is part of your maturity. Think back to those who made love feel like something you had to earn. Those who gave in pieces, who made you question your worth, or only valued your light when it benefited them. You weren't foolish for loving deeply. You were learning to recognize what love actually is. That is why this season is mercy. God is not only sending the right people, He is freeing you from what only felt familiar, because familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar peace, especially when your nervous system was trained in chaos. So at first, steadiness may feel unfamiliar, even suspicious. But don't reject peace because it feels quiet. Don't mistrust consistency because it lacks emotional chaos. Don't mistake stability for absence. The one sent by God will bring clarity without confusion, steadiness without control, and kindness without demand for self-abandonment. So remember this when your heart hesitates. If you must hide your needs, pause. If honesty feels unsafe, pause. If clarity feels like a threat, pause. If the connection pulls you away from God, pause. And if your peace has to be sacrificed to keep it, release it. God has never asked you to lose your healing in order to hold on to something He never assigned. And if someone brings honesty, consistency, humility, and peace into your life, don't reject it just because it feels unfamiliar. Healing is often quieter than the chaos you once called love, and that quiet can feel strange until your heart learns a new language. Ask the Father to help you recognize what awakens old wounds versus what brings your spirit into alignment. This is where your freedom begins to return. You don't need to accuse, panic, or prove anything through effort. Instead, watch the fruit, honor the peace growing within you, and stop confusing anxiety with the voice of God. If this is speaking to you, type discernment. Let it stand as a boundary and a prayer that fear will no longer lead your next season. The person God is sending is already moving toward the meeting point. But before they are recognized, something familiar may return to test what you've learned. Let the old sound pass, and let the true voice become clear. What's unfolding is not only about who is arriving, but about the heart that will receive them. Many chosen ones sense change before they can explain it. Doors shift, seasons close, and something unseen begins drawing them forward. But sensing movement is not the same as being ready to receive it. You can love God deeply and still hesitate when peace finally arrives, because every new moment gets measured against old pain. That doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. One part of you may be ready, while another is still recovering from survival. Your heart may want trust again, while your body remembers the cost of opening too quickly. Sometimes your spirit reaches forward, but your nervous system still expects loss. This is why this is also the receiver season, not just about what is being sent. Imagine trying to hear a clear message in a noisy room. The message is unchanged, but perception becomes difficult. In the same way, peace can feel like danger when the heart is overwhelmed, and steadiness can feel suspicious when inconsistency was once normal. The Father is not only arranging what is coming toward you, He is restoring your ability to recognize what is holy when it arrives. You made a draw want, no one. He made a draw want. 3 hours and flew. Heavier, certain voices feel off, and your inner warning becomes harder to ignore. That is not punishment. It is refinement. He is teaching your heart to stop calling confusion normal and to recognize what carries real alignment. Because when the person God sends arrives, desire won't be enough. You will need peace, discernment, and a heart that no longer confuses gentleness with danger. So pause with this question. What if the promise has been closer than you thought, but the deepest work has been happening within you? Some of what felt like waiting was restoration. Some silence was God, calming what had been trembling, teaching you to say yes without fear and no without guilt. As healing continues, something shifts inside you. People who once controlled your emotions begin to lose their hold. You stop romanticizing inconsistency, and emotional chaos stops feeling meaningful. You become quieter, slower, but far more discerning. Don't fear this. Quiet, it's clearing space so you can recognize what peace actually sounds like. And here is what begins to make your waiting make sense. They couldn't arrive while you were still negotiating your worth. The Father was never withholding love. He was protecting something sacred from being received by a version of you that believed love required self-erasure. There was a version of you that overgave, stayed too long, and mistook sacrifice for love, hoping imbalance would eventually turn into consistency. Many chosen ones live inside this pattern without realizing it. You want steady love, yet when it appears, something feels uneasy because uncertainty has been normal for so long. Beneath labels like trust issues is a heart trained to expect disappointment before hope fully breathes, and the Father has never judged that. He saw every moment you made yourself smaller to keep connection alive. That is why delay became mercy. God wasn't calling you unworthy. He was protecting you from building your future on a version of yourself that disappears to be loved. That pattern quietly shapes love into something conditional, where you feel pressure to stay easy, patient, and endlessly understanding. But the person God sends will never reward performance. They are coming to meet the truth. He has been restoring beneath your survival, not the version shaped by self-abandonment. They will recognize fruit, not performance. That's why some people couldn't stay. They only knew your overgiving self, not your becoming. When they left, it felt like rejection, but it was separation from an old agreement that no longer belongs to your future. You were never difficult to love. You were trying to receive love where there wasn't capacity for what you carry. Your past doesn't prove love is unsafe. It shows you learned love where safety was rare. And now the Father is teaching you a new language. This is where your freedom returns. Stop auditioning for what God has already assigned. Stop shrinking to be chosen. Instead, declare quietly, I will not audition for what God has assigned. I will discern it. I will receive it. I will walk in truth. That is alignment, and it protects what God has restored in you. Don't run from peace because it feels unfamiliar, and don't mistrust consistency because it lacks chaos. You are no longer the version that chases echoes. You are learning to recognize truth by slowing down and listening deeper. Revelation alone isn't enough. The heart must be strong enough to live what it sees. Many chosen ones believe and forgive, yet still hesitate when peace arrives because the nervous system remembers what safety once cost them. That doesn't mean God is distant. It means the receiver is tired. So the Father is restoring more than your heart. He is restoring how you recognize what is good. Little by little, you're learning that not every open hand closes, and not every quiet moment leads to loss. Your reactions slow, your discernment sharpens, and your spirit becomes less reactive. These shifts are evidence of deep healing. The Father is making space within you for what fear could never hold: peace, clarity, and discernment without suspicion. That is why this season matters. The promise is moving toward you, and you are becoming the one who can finally receive it. The deeper invitation has never been about finding the promise. It has always been about becoming ready to recognize it with a peaceful heart. Chosen one, when the noise within you begins to settle, you start seeing what God has been moving toward you all along. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not a new beginning, but finally having the clarity to receive what was always drawing near. That is why I want to ask you something. When the person God has prepared steps into your life, will your heart recognize peace or mistake it for danger? After long seasons of disappointment, fear learns to expect loss before love has the chance to stay. What once protected you can quietly become the very wall that keeps you from receiving what God has prepared. This is why your posture matters. Arrival is not about chasing, controlling, or pretending you no longer carry scars. It is about standing in quiet trust, allowing faith and discernment to walk together while peace becomes stronger than fear. That posture teaches you to wait without grasping and to receive without losing yourself. The person sent by God will never ask you to betray your peace just to stay connected. Their steadiness may feel unfamiliar because your heart spent too long surviving inconsistency. But unfamiliar does not mean unsafe. At the same time, keep honoring your discernment. Peace never asks you to ignore what the Father is gently revealing. So ask yourself honestly, does this relationship draw me closer to God or closer to obsession? Does it produce peace, humility, truth, and healthy fruit over time? Slow down and let time reveal what excitement never can. Because what God sends will always carry fruit worthy of trust. This is where the old pattern finally begins to break. You stop treating every blessing like another threat, and you stop asking new people to pay for wounds they never caused. Instead, you become calmer, clearer, and more grounded. You let consistency matter more than intensity, and you let peace become louder than panic. If this speaks to your heart, type peace. Let it become a quiet declaration that your next season will no longer be led by fear, wearing a spiritual disguise. The person sent by God is already on their way, and when they arrive, they will meet a steadier version of you, someone who has learned to recognize what heaven has been preparing. Now become still for a moment. Place your hand over your heart, soften your shoulders, and breathe slowly. You do not have to force tomorrow to reveal itself. Simply return to the Father and remember that your worth was spoken long before another person ever recognized it. Picture yourself standing before the door you spent years trying to force open. Every time it stayed closed, you wondered if God was saying no. But now, instead of pushing harder, step back. As you stand quietly with God, the handle begins to turn from the other side. That is often how divine arrival works. Imagine a long road before you. You stand at one end with peace in your heart, while beyond what you can see, God is already aligning lives, timing, and circumstances for the holy crossing. What looked like empty waiting was never empty at all. It was preparation. Say these words slowly within yourself. I am not late. I am being aligned. I am not forgotten. I am being prepared. I will not chase what God did not send. I will recognize what carries His peace. Let those words reach every place in you that still trembles when life grows quiet. Peace does not mean every answer arrives today. It means your heart stays connected to God while the picture becomes clear. Whenever fear returns, come back to this moment. Ask the Father to reveal fruit instead of fantasy, assignment instead of attraction, and wisdom instead of urgency. Stay with this truth, chosen one. God is not sending someone to rescue the version of you that refuses healing. He is bringing what belongs with the person He has been quietly shaping through every season you thought was empty. You are no longer chasing closed doors. You are learning to recognize what carries life. You are not waiting because you have been overlooked. You are waiting because you are being aligned for the meeting point. The Father has seen every silent tear, every lonely night, and every moment you almost returned to familiar pain because it felt safer than unfamiliar peace. He closed certain doors not to reject you, but to protect the future. He was preparing. That was not rejection, it was mercy. That was not punishment, it was protection. And if you look carefully, you will see that you are no longer the same person who first began waiting. You have learned that peace is holy. You no longer confuse anxiety with confirmation, and you no longer believe you must perform to be loved. When the person sent by God arrives, they will not become your source. They will simply recognize the worth God has already restored within you. Hear this, chosen one, my child. I never forgot what I promised. I was not only preparing what was coming to you, I was preparing you to receive it without losing yourself. Let those words settle where fear once lived. Because what God sends will always find the surrendered heart. Now declare this over yourself. I am not forgotten. I am not chasing. I am not begging. I am aligned. I am aligned. I am discerning. I am ready to receive what God sends and release what He never assigned. Hold on to those words whenever doubt tells you that nothing is changing. Remember this above all else. The holy crossing begins long before the visible meeting. God can be moving another life toward yours while He is healing something within you. So keep walking in peace, guard your heart without hardening it, and stay awake without becoming suspicious. The person sent by God is already on their way, and you, chosen one, are already becoming the person who will recognize them when they arrive. If this message speaks to your heart, type, "It is on its way." Let those words become your declaration of trust, and share this message with someone who needs to remember that God has never forgotten the meeting point.